Hello, I'm Neil Singer, Safety Director for the Embraer Jets Operator Association. Welcome to our video series, Good to Great, where we will provide you with the tools to enhance the safe operation of your aircraft. Enjoy. Whether attending or teaching recurrent training, I see the most difficult tasks to execute are those that we either perform infrequently or not at all during normal operations. By following along and chair flying with me as I perform the check ride maneuvers, you can go into your next training event more confident and prepared. For the clean stall, it's typically executed with the autopilot on until the stall warning. We're at least 5,000 feet. The autopilot's on and we've gone to idle thrust. As the speed decays, we'll receive the increased speed warning, which we're going to ignore.
Increase speed. 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 Increase speed.
At the stall warning,
Increase
the autopilot
speed.
will disconnect.
Stall. Stall.
We're going to recover by pitching down,
Stall. Stall.
adding thrust. As soon as we are out of the yellow low speed range, we can start to pitch back up.
Increase speed. Increase speed.
We would receive an autopilot annunciation if we don't press the red disconnect button. And as we approach our entry altitude and at least 130 knots, we can start reducing our thrust to 60-65% N1. That'll just keep us from accelerating too quickly and make it easier to not balloon through our altitude on the recovery. For the takeoff configuration stall, I'm at 5,000 feet, autopilot's on, I've gone to idle, and we're going to set flaps to 1 for this maneuver. At 130 knots, I'm going to disconnect the autopilot, stop putting nose up trim inputs, and roll into a 20-degree bank left or right. There's my 130. Autopilot's coming off. I'm going to smoothly roll into a 20-degree bank while I maintain my altitude. Some pilots like to disconnect the flight director, turn it off at this point. Some pilots leave it on. That's purely technique. I'm maintaining altitude and bank.
Stall.
The stall warning. I'm lowering the nose, adding thrust, and rolling my wings level all more or less simultaneously. I can sync my heading bug so my flight director gives me some good guidance during the recovery. Outside the yellow low speed awareness band, I can start to pitch back to the flight director. As I pass through 130 knots, I can bring my flaps up, and approaching my entry altitude, I can start to reduce my thrust to 60-65% N1 to help me not balloon through my altitude during the recovery. For the landing configuration stall, autopilot's on, we're at 5,000 feet. We're going to start configuring for landing. We'll go flaps 1, put our gear down. We don't want to reduce our thrust too much or we'll hit 130 knots before we've reached the flap full configuration. Once the gear is down, then our speed checks. We'll select flaps 2. And then once we've reached our flap full extension speed, we'll select flaps full. At 130 knots, we'll disconnect the autopilot, bring our power to idle.
Autopilot.
And with yoke alone, we're maintaining altitude. No more trim so that we don't have an excessive nose up on the recovery. Increasing back pressure. At the stall warning, we're going to simultaneously lower the nose, add thrust.
Stall.
Now we're not bringing our flaps to 2 until we're safely outside the yellow low airspeed awareness band. Then we can smoothly pitch to the flight director. Once we see our altitude reverse, that's our positive rate, the gear can come up. And then as we pass through 130 knots, we can clean our last remaining flaps up. Once we do that, we can bring our thrust back to about 65% N1 so that we're not fighting that rapid acceleration. For a nose-high unusual attitude recovery, it's really important that as we recover, we maintain a 50 to 60 degree bank so that we don't put negative
trim
or 0 G's on the airplane. So as I'm ready to start the recovery, I'm going to roll to that bank and let the nose slice down through the horizon. It's really important I add thrust with my airspeed decaying because I'm unloading the airplane right now and the stall speed is going to increase. So with that real low speed, I want to pitch well below the horizon before I start to pull back up, or I could enter a stall during the recovery. For a nose low unusual attitude, it's important that if we're in a bank, we go back to 0 bank angle before we start the recovery so we don't overload the aircraft. So I'm ready to recover. I'm going to bring my wings level and my power to idle, speed brakes as necessary, and then for the actual pull out, I want to balance pulling too fast and overloading the airplane versus pulling too slow and maybe increasing my speed past a safe point and or having altitude loss more than I want. Approaching 0 pitch, I can have my speed brakes and thrust as necessary and then resume coordinated straight and level flight. Two engines spooling up. Thrust is set. Airspeed's alive. 70 knots, check. V1, rotate. Now if I have an engine failure and I haven't rotated yet, I just want to rotate nice and slowly. I don't want to yank the plane off the ground. It gives me time to get the rudder dialed in. Positive rate, gear up. And I'm going to go to flight level change and just adjust my bug smoothly and slowly down to V2. I want my ball just about centered or slightly deflected to the good engine, maybe a slight bit of bank into the good engine, and I'm just trying to stay on my heading. If my heading bug is off to the right, it usually means I need a little more right rudder. We have an E1 fail, not surprising. Now we're just climbing, maintaining that coordination, slight bank, and waiting till we get to acceleration altitude. If I want to, I could put in some yaw trim to help me with the force. But the main thing is I'm just trying to maintain that nearly centered condition, heading and V2. Cancel that message. At my leisure, don't rush to do something other than fly the plane though. So our acceleration altitude is going to be 1,000 above the ground, which is about 1,300 feet. Reaching that, we can put the autopilot on, yaw damp off, so I'm still in charge of the rudder, and we can increase our bugged speed to VFS. As the plane starts to accelerate, I can ever so slightly come off the rudder, but I still do need to hold a good bit of force in. At V2 plus 11, our flaps can come up, and at VFS, I'll bring my thrust back to continuous thrust. And at this point, I can run my climb and engine failure checklists. For 2 engine go around, we're approaching our minimums, and we don't have any contact with the runway, so we're anticipating a go around might be necessary.
Minimums.
So we're going to start with pickle, smoothly apply power, and smoothly pitch up to the flight director. Flaps come up 2 clicks, in this case full to 2. As soon as we see a positive rate of climb, gear up, nav. Now in this case, In this avionics load, FMS is selected for us, so the nav is just a verification, but in other avionics load, we'd actually be selecting that. We're waiting for 400 feet. At 400 feet, we can select flight level change, a speed of 160, and as we start accelerating through about VFS, we can bring our flaps up one click at a time to flap 0. And then at the appropriate point when we're ready for the autopilot, we can put the autopilot on and verify our modes, FMS, autopilot, yaw damp, flight level change, accelerating to 160. Climb thrust, and at this point we could do our climb checklist. For the single engine go around, it's even more important that we put all of our inputs in very smoothly and deliberately. We're considering the thrust lever of the operative engine linked to the rudder pedal
500.
on that side. So as I add thrust, I want to be bringing that rudder forward in conjunction with the thrust lever.
Autopilot.
So at minimums, if I had to do a go around, pickle,
400.
power, with the rudder coming in smoothly with it, pitch slowly towards the flight director, and flaps come up 2 clicks to flaps 1. What I'm trying to do here is maintain VAC, and with the flaps in transition and the gear down, it might take a lower pitch than the flight director. Now at positive rate, I can bring the gear up, FMS if necessary, flight level change, and I want to set my bug to VAC. Now as the gear comes up, and the flaps reach 1, you'll notice that the airplane's accelerating above VAC. So with that drag reduced, I can pitch up quite a bit more to hold that VAC in the climb. Now we're waiting for our acceleration altitude, pre-calculated as 1300 MSL. Trim as necessary to help keep that ball almost but not quite centered, a little deflected towards the good engine. Flying the flight director. If I want to, at my acceleration altitude of 1300 feet, autopilot on, yaw damp off, and I'm going to twist my speed bug up to VFS. As the plane accelerates, I can slowly reduce the rudder input to maintain that nearly centered ball. At VAC plus 11, or VFS, which are almost going to always be within a knot or two of each other, the flaps can come up. At VFS, my thrust can come back to the continuous setting, and I can run my single engine go around checklist. On the circle to land, we're fully configured before the final approach fix, and we're shooting for a speed of 130 during the initial part of the circle and the maneuver. You'll notice we're not using approach mode, we're using nav only with vertical speed. That way our glide path or glide slope, if we were coupled to it, would take us right through our MDA, and we don't want to do that. So we're going to see our MDA captured here. At MDA, within 2.7 miles of the runway, we can go to our heading mode. We're in our protected airspace now. We've set up our MFD ahead of time with a 2.5 mile range ring that approximates that 2.7 for a Category C aircraft doing a circle with expanded TERPS protection, which almost every airport now in the US seems to have. So as long as we keep any part of any runway within that 2.5 mile ring, we are well inside the protected area. So we can offset a little bit towards final. We've got both our approach and our landing runways in sight here. We've got the sim set to visibility quite a bit above minimums. So right about here, I'm gonna bring it over. I can see with my heading bug where I'm gonna be on approximately that base heading.
Minimums.
At this point, I can set my altitude for my missed approach altitude. By having my track vector set to 60 seconds, I can see an instantaneous turn radius. That's going to be really useful as I make my turn onto final. We're circling to the far runway, 18 right. We're inside the protected area. And at the appropriate point, when I feel like it's time to start my turn to final, I'm going to swing my heading bug around to the heading of the landing runway, I'm going to select a vertical speed down of about 500 feet a minute, autopilot
Autopilot.
off, and I'm going to start slowing to ref through the turn. Pilots are more likely to end up overshooting the runway than undershooting, so if I see that I'm started my turn a little early, that's actually good, and I can just temporarily shallow out my bank by looking at where that extended 60-second track intersects the extended final for the runway I'm landing to. Again, pilots are more likely to end up high than low, so I want to make sure I'm descending. I can use on final my synthetic vision to see if the runway threshold sits right on the 3-degree point. Then I know I'm perfectly aligned on a 3-degree descent towards the runway. If I want for a little extra situational awareness, I can move my speed bug down to VREF. Again, I'm just steadily
200.
slowing to ref as I descend. I see my runways right around the 3-degree point. I'm smoothly decelerating.
100.
I want to cross the threshold ideally at 50 feet and VREF. Right at threshold, I'm going to go to idle, and we're aiming to touch down as close to that 1,000-foot mark as possible. Review these maneuvers as much as you need before your next training event for a more efficient and relaxed experience. Thank you for joining us, and a special thank you to ECTS for the generous donation of the simulator time and staffing that makes these videos possible. Fly safely and look for more videos soon. And if there's a topic you'd like to see us cover, please send an email to safety@ejoa.aero.